Mark, can you share with us your use of two narrators?
Yes. The story I just told you about my 10th birthday was told mostly in the past tense. Now, what we will do when someone asks you something and you're about to tell an autobiographical story, or you want to tell a story, or you want to tell someone about what you just witnessed or you saw a week or two ago, you will, by instinct, and there's a lot of reasons for this, tell it in the past tense. You will say, okay, it was last Wednesday, and I was driving my car on the freeway, and then I saw, and it's in the past tense. Now, as soon as you are telling the story in the past tense, the listener automatically knows several things. They know that you know the ending of the story. Now, that sounds silly, or maybe a little confusing. Why wouldn't you? Of course you do know the ending. But when you tell it in the past tense, that narrator, talking in the past tense, knows the end of the story. That narrator also knows everything that's happened since that story until the present moment. And that's why we call it the omniscient narrator, the narrator who knows everything. I know the story I'm going to tell you. I know how it ends. I know everything that's happened since then. I know the repercussions of that story. I know everything. So it actually means that in the telling of the story is like here, and the storyteller is here telling about this thing, and you, the listener, are there, and there's the story. So the story is separate from me, the storyteller, and separate from you. It's this entity that exists by itself here. Then there's another narrator. And the other narrator is called the naive narrator. And this is the tricky one and very, very powerful. The naive narrator tells the story in the present tense. Tells the story not only just in the present tense, but is telling the story from the point that the character is in at the moment, not knowing even what's going to happen in the next few seconds. So rather than in the past tense, okay, it was last Wednesday, I was driving my car on the 405. That's the omniscient narrator. The naive narrator, I'm driving my car, I'm on the 405. Now, it's in the present tense. Now, right then, just the fact that you hear it in the present tense shifts the whole story. Because it sounds like I don't know what's going to happen. I'm driving on the 405, and I see this little yellow car, and it's zooming up behind me. I can see it in my rear view mirror. Now, I can tell you all that. You still get the feeling that I don't know what's going to happen. Although, of course, if you're smart enough, you say, well, Mark is telling me this story. He's here in front of me. He must know how it's going to end. But my feeling is he doesn't. He doesn't because he's put himself in the middle of the story, telling the story as it happens. He is totally, totally naive. Now, Karen, the story is not here with me here. The story is around me, and it's actually around you too. You are in the middle of the story. I'm in the middle of the story. And quite honestly, that's where you want to be. Now think about this. Every screenplay that you've ever read, and I'm assuming you've read a lot of them, they're all in the present tense. They're all in the present tense. Jim does this, he does that, he does this, he does that. Do you know why they're in the present tense? Because when it's up on the screen, we want to believe it's happening as we watch it. Now, we, as an audience of film, are smart enough to know that we go to see a movie. We know they spent how many years writing it, how many months shooting it, all the work they've done. It's done, it's finished, but we go and we watch it, suspending disbelief and believing that what we are watching right now on the screen is happening in the moment, because that's where we want to be. So the naive narrator can take us into the center of the story. So as you're telling a story, it's not which narrator you use, it's when you use each narrator that gives you control over the story. In other words, I could be telling you the story. I'm making up this story about the 405. It's just as good as anything else. I'm driving on the 405. I'm on the 405, and I'm feeling nervous because behind me I see in this rearview mirror this yellow car is coming at me, and he or she or whatever is going way too fast, and I'm really scared. Now that's all the naive narrator. And you are probably in a point of going, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Now I, as the storyteller, and this is the beauty of being a storyteller, am in total control of this story. And I, at any time I want, can pop you out of the story. Right now you're in the middle of the story. I can pop you out at any time I want. And I can say, the car is coming at me, and it's coming faster and faster. Now you've got to understand something about me and yellow cars. You know, the first car I ever bought was a yellow station wagon. It was really an ugly car. Now what I just did is I jumped to the other narrator. I jumped out of the story. I jumped to the other narrator. I'm giving you some information that I think you need to have, which will help inform the story. But I've left you hanging about what's going on in the story. And there's a part of you go, okay, great information, but what's happening there? Okay, I got it. Now I have you curious about two things. Why am I getting this new information, and what's happening there? And then at any moment I can say, and I look in the rear view mirror, and it's coming closer and closer and closer, and I can see there's nobody driving it. There's nobody. So I can switch back and forth. Now, as I switch back and forth between those two narrators, I'm actually manipulating you. I'm bringing you into the story, pulling you out of the story. Bring you into the story, pull you out of the story. That's all part of the structure of the story that I want to tell. That's how I want to tell it. But I'm playing with you. I'm playing with your relationship to the story.
Do we like being manipulated? Does the audience, I mean, I realize that's a weird way to say it, but is that something we like?
Do you like roller coasters, Karen?
I don't.
You don't.
But I like movies.
But you like movies.
But I don't like roller coasters. No.
Okay, but you did that, so that's why I thought. But I think there's sort of a wonderful love-hate relationship with being manipulated. I don't want to be manipulated. And then we go through a movie, oh, that's so scary. Wasn't that great? And I'm thinking, well, you were just manipulated. I think we find our forms of entertainment that manipulate us, whether it's roller coaster rides or a movie, that take us into danger, take us into a zone of danger where we feel that we're at risk. A roller coaster ride, we could die. You feel that way. Sometimes in a movie, it's an emotional danger. I'm going to feel sad, I'm going to feel hurt, I'm going to feel scared. But then we come out going, wow, that was great. I want to see that again. But I say, you were scared, you were screaming out of fear. So there's this curious relationship we have. My feeling is when we go to see a movie, or we read a book, or hear a story being told, is please manipulate me, thrill me, scare me, dazzle me. My only caveat is don't bore me. Don't be boring. I don't mind movies that I hate because I felt hate. I hate this, then I hate these. I don't mind characters that I hate. People say, wasn't that one? I hated her. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And all these characters and all these stories, they do manipulate us. But the worst thing is to go, there's no point to watching this. There's nothing going on. This is just boring. That's the worst.
How do most people use the naive narrator incorrectly and then the omniscient narrator incorrectly?
Several things about the two narrators you need to understand and how they can be, if they're used incorrectly, they just won't be effective at all. One thing about the omniscient narrator does know everything. The omniscient narrator, since the omniscient narrator is talking about an event there, and is actually, that narrator is not involved in the event, that narrator is only telling about the event. The mistake you can do is say, okay, I'm going to tell this story, and then I'm going to get really emotional so that the audience will know how emotionally I was affected at that time. But you're still telling it in the past tense. And when she looked at me, I wanted to cry, and then she did this, and then she did that. And you know what we have now? Therapy. Why am I telling the story? Am I telling the story because I want to go through those emotions again? Because we can feel, the audience can feel that emotion is not connected with the story. That emotion is connected with the memory of the story. So the emotional journey of the character does not belong in that narrator. It belongs in the naive narrator. Now the naive narrator just say, and she's looking at me and I'm really scared. Now I'm in the present tense. And I go, that's totally acceptable because you're telling me what's going on and how you're feeling, which is also what's going on in the moment. But if the naive narrator tries to put this into some larger perspective, I'm looking at her and you got to understand, I've really had a lot of trouble with relationships for a long time. And you go, where are you going? Why are you thinking about that in the middle of this moment with this woman? Why? That's the job of the omniscient narrator. They each have separate jobs, and you have to be purely in one or the other all the time.